What's up, YouTube? Today we are here with another paper video. We have the Emu deck once again. This is my current list. It is just Guanrong's list from a couple weeks back at this point during his CS. The tech options, like the flex spots, are these 4 cards in my opinion. I think realistically you need at least 2 Shira, but some people play without the Shira altogether. Some people also cut the Stussy. I think Stussy is needed in this deck for the ace going first. I'm probably going to stand by that for the duration of OP-13. Maybe I'll change my mind as I learn more, but as of right now, this is where I'm at. I'm just gonna go over some basic what to mulligan for in this video based on the matchups, because Emu is a very matchup specific deck. We don't do a lot of tech choices for specific matchups, but we do play our deck slightly different. Okay, so for the Emu mirror, first and foremost, whether you're going first or second, we are always grabbing the 1 cost stage for the mirror. This is because our 7 cost stage can be removed with a never existed, which really sucks. So do not play the 7 cost stage in the mirror. PSA for everyone, unless never existed gets banned, then we are always playing the 1 cost stage in the mirror. Point blank period. Now, what are we looking for on the mulligan? Well, in the mulligan, we're almost always looking for the same things, whether we're going first or second. The real nuance in this matchup is how our games progress. So our key cards are going to be your 1 cost searchers early, your 4 cost units throughout the entire game, and then your horse and the Jupiter. So the other thing that we're going to be looking for in this matchup is if we are going, where we get a little bit more nuanced here, is if we're going first or second. If we're going second, then we can also prioritize having 1 or 2 of these counter events in our hand. Now, the reason why we need to be going second for this is because with the stage, our 4 cost units become a 3 cost. Our 6 cost units become a 5 cost. So if we're going on a normal turn progression, our ideal curve going first would be something like Charla plus the search event into a Saturn. Saturn would have 1 card left, so then we'd either want plus 1 of these or 1 of these in our hand at this stage, right? So if we had 1 of these in our hand, that counts as a counter, and we can use the event for the counter there. Or we could go for just another search, get more units to the trash, and then on our turn 6, the absolute best turn 6 would be to play a multiple Warcry or Saturn units onto the board. And then, because we can do 2, right? For 6 Dawn, we can play Warcry and Saturn, or 2 Saturns, or 2 Warcry. Any combination of 2 4 costs on turn 3 puts us into the most explosive turn 4, which is to just drop a Jupiter and have 1 Dawn up. So if we have a turn for Jupiter, we're now swinging 7, 7, 5 minimally. We have 1 Dawn up for 1 of our counter events. If that counter event happens to be after all these years I'm losing my edge, this is a +1 to hand as well. So being able to go second is definitely ideal because we're able to get into this very, very explosive turn 4 where we're swinging 7 for 2, a minimum of 2 times, usually 3 times. Because if we played a unit here, unit here, we're going to take our life a little bit early so that we can guarantee that we can kind of protect our board. And then we can go for that turn 4 into the Jupiter. After that, into the turn 5, obviously we're going to start going for our 5 Elder spams and chaining those back to back to back because that's the most valuable play in the entire game. But the early game is where you can really start to pull ahead on the resource battle and make the difference. Now, let's say we don't have the Jupiter on our turn 4, or let's say that on our 6th Dawn turn, we don't see double 4 costs. What are our alternative routes? Well, the other good play here would be to just go for Nezuro. So Nezuro here means that we're able to immediately turn sideways, get a little bit of extra aggressive pressure, and we played it for 5, so we have 1 Dawn left over for a counter event. Again, the counter event of choice in most cases is going to be Never Lose My Edge. This card is very good in the mirror because we're doing a lot of 5k pokes with these units before we get into the 10 cost gaming. And this allows us to, if we have 10 or more cards in our trash, we're able to immediately grab back a card to our hand and then continue playing from there. If we also have 10 or more cards in our trash, he's able to give a -2k to something, which means that if they want to keep that unit on the board, he'll have to give us 2 cards instead of just 1 to protect it, which makes this a very good card in the mirror. Another card that is kind of shaded in the mirror a lot of the time is Mars. So Mars is not something that we're going to want in our hand very often going second. However, going first, it does sometimes come up where, let's say they only saw 1 of their searches. So instead of seeing double searcher, so 2 searches plus 1 cycle is equal to 7 cards in trash, but 1 card plus 1 cycle and then another cycle, that's only going to be 5 cards in trash. And assuming you only have 1 swing on your turn 2, that means that their turn, at most they have 6 cards in their trash if they don't have 2 of the 1 cost searches, that trash cards, right? In that case, your first Mars can remove their first body, which puts you to where you have, let's say you went first. So your turn 1, let's say you did a Sharla, you cycle the Sharla, you have 4 in trash. Your turn 2, you play the Saturn. Saturn searches for something, you cycle something, so you now have 5 in trash. You go Mars on your turn 3. They just played a Saturn of their own. You on their turn 2. So you remove their Saturn. They now have 7 in trash, so there's no more value for the Mars. To activate the Mars, you trash a card from hand, so you have 6, and then you cycle when you're at 7. So now you have a protected board, and you have a blocker, and you get to poke for 5 with leader, poke for 5. On their turn, they're going to have at most 2 pokes with the Nezuro that's not going to get the minus. And then you have a sideways unit to swing into and continue to outvalue. Or they get 1 swing in, which you're going to outvalue, and then they could play down 2 units. But then if they play out 2 units on their 6th Dawn turn and you just ended up in a Mars situation, they just played 2, you have 2 already, and then you could go into, on your 7th Dawn turn, play a Jupiter or a Nezuro, or you could return that with 2 4-cost units and replace themselves, and then now you're winning the resource war. So, Mars comes up sometimes in the going first curve, but going second curve, you're almost never going to be able to get value out of this. I think that's about it to cover in the mirror for mulligans. Basically, what we're looking for, as many 4-cost units as possible. Nezuro is after the 4-cost, and then Jupiter, and then these are going to be mostly used for cycle. That's like the high-level summary of what you need to know about the Emu opening hands. For Ace, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to grab the 7-cost stage. 7-cost stage, so good in every single matchup except for the mirror. Arguably also Luffy. Don't quote me on that though, because I'm not quite sure. I haven't tested it myself, but I've heard that into Magellan gaming decks, we want to also run the 1-cost stage. I'm not sure about that, but that's what I'll say for now. What we're looking for into the Ace matchup is going to be the same, but slightly different. So obviously, Searcher's always good. Beginning of the game, we're always going to be looking for the Searchers pretty much regardless of the matchup. We want to get to 7 cards in our trash as fast as possible so that we cannot be swindled and have our stuff removed. We want to make sure that we have as uninteractable of a board as possible. That's what's stupid about this deck. That's what makes this deck amazing. That's why you play it. So we want to make sure that we get our trash filled ASAP. Now from here, the other thing that we're almost always going to want in basically every other matchup is also the Saturn. So Saturn, I'm going to just kind of shorthand these and say we want all of our searchers. If you see multiple of these, like if you see one of each of these, it's a snap keep, right? We're going to find everything else. It's fine. Don't worry about it. This deck cycles a billion times a game. It draws a billion cards. You'll be fine. What other cards we want to see in our hand is the counter event in the ace matchup. Whether we're going first or second, we want to see counter events. This is because ace is going to be swinging a minimum of 7 most turns. Because to have the leader ability live and get that extra draw whenever they lose a life, they need to have a Dawn under them. If they have a Dawn under them, they're swinging for 7 instead of 6, which means a 3k counter or a 4k counter is going to be a 1 card out to those, and we want to be going into our 10 Dawn turns with as much life as reasonably responsible. Now, other cards that are really good into the ace matchup would include the Shirahoshi. So Shirahoshi is really nice because Shirahoshi allows us to cycle the Gorosei a little bit earlier if we have bricked up on like 2 or 3 of these before we ever get anywhere near our 10 Dawn turn. Or maybe off of a Sharla or a search event, we've accidentally milled 1 or more copies of the 10 cost event. Shira allows us to put those back to the bottom of the deck and not run out of resources in the late game. The other cards that we might be interested in this matchup would be Mars. So Ace plays 5 cost Yamato because it's a draw 2 and it gives you a Rest of Dawn. You're always playing that card as Ace. Mars just says die to Yamato. He also takes out the 4 cost Marco. Now we give them some draws, usually 3 draws, when we take out a Marco, but it's taking out a Marco. We want to keep their number of swings as low as possible until we get to the late game. And if we're able to slow down the game, we're probably going to end up winning in the super late game. So both of these are pretty good whether we're going first or second. Both of these are really good going first or second, and all of the searchers are really good going first or second. If we're going first, you could consider hard mulling for the Stussy. Now, what I mean by that is I'm not going to go and keep a hand that is Stussy plus 4 counter events. That's not worth it. I'm also not going to keep a Stussy plus Goroseis. I'm not going to keep a Stussy plus like a Jupiter and a Venus, right? However, if I have a Stussy plus a Sharla, and then maybe like some other names like a Warcry, maybe a Mars, and maybe a counter event, I might consider keeping that. I'm not seeing all the names. I'm not seeing 7 cards immediately in the trash. What I am seeing here is if I'm going first, I've got Sharla. This is going to be 3 new cards, right? Well, I get to see 3 cards deep. I'm going to grab one of those, preferably, and I'm going to trash the other 2. So that's potentially 2 names in my trash, right? I'm then going to cycle the Sharla. And since we are playing the 7 cost stage instead of the 1 cost stage, turn 2, we don't need Saturn yet. We need to find our Saturn on turn 3. Because we can't play him until our 5 Dawn turn, can't play it on our 3 Dawn turn. So this means we have 1 more turn to try to find additional resources going first. And with another cycle, we might find another of our searchers, we might find the Saturn, we might find something else, we might find some counter. In all those scenarios, we're doing fine. And at worst case, our turn 3 is going to be play Warcry, swing 5. And our Warcry at this point, because we have Sharla plus a counter out, plus a couple of cycles, he'll be a blocker. So worst case, it's a block plus a draw, which puts us in a situation where we might have a Saturn at that point. We're going to have seen so many new cards by that point, it's likely that we are in that situation. And then if on our 9 Dawn turn, we go Stussy, and then after we do the Stussy on their first 10 cost blocker, we start chaining our 10 cost, we are going to super out value our opponent, and we will win that 8 out of 9 times. If you Stussy on curve into the ace matchup, after they play their 8 cost event on 8 Dawn, you will end up outvaluing if you're curving out into your 10 elders after, or 5 elders after that. So that is the situation where we might hard mull for Stussy. If we're going second, we're no longer hard mulling for Stussy. Even if I have that hand that I would potentially keep going first, going second, I would not. I would be a little bit more aggressive and try to get multiple of these searchers. Any combination of 2 of these is going to be pretty hard to pass up because your probability isn't going to be that you're going to see more than 2. But you do have a pretty good chance of seeing 2 of these in your opening hand. If I see a Saturn plus a Charla, and then the rest of my hand is just cracked, like I'm seeing something like this as my opening hand. I've got 4 names and a searcher. I'm probably snap keeping. I don't have the 3 searchers snap keep, but I have 2 searchers. I'm seeing 4 of my 5 names already. 2 of those bodies in there are going to replace themselves and give me additional resources. I'm liking that, right? And I would take that over a Stussian hand going second, because going second, we're going to be going, they're going to have to be on 9 Dawn. We're going to respond with our 10 Dawn play. And most of the time, if they only have 1 body and we start 10 Dawning, doing our 10 Dawn plays, we're going to end up outvaluing because our horse is going to be swinging usually 12K in that late game situation while giving minus 2K to their blocker. And if they get rid of this, if they can't get rid of this, which often they won't, they're only playing 1 body because we have the 2 unremovable blockers, we're then able to swing this, give it minus 2, do our next 10 Dawn play, give it minus 4, and swing 12 into an 8K, which means that if we're able to do that multiple times, we're going to end up just super, super outvaluing our opponents. And yeah, it's very, very nice. So I think that's really all there is to the Mulligan and what we're searching for. In the ace matchup, let's move on to Zoro. Okay, so like I said, I'm just going to hand wave. We're always looking for these searchers. This is not the mirror, so we're grabbing the 7-cost stage. These are things that we're looking for first or second, any matchup. Okay, what are we looking for specifically into Zoro? Well, Zoro has a few things that make it unique compared to the other matchups. One, we're most likely going to be trying to largely starve out the matchup. So what we mean by that is we're not going to touch your life until we get to about 8 Dawn. Once we get to 8 Dawn, we can start to kind of poke at their board, or poke at their life and kind of pressure them in other ways. But before 8 Dawn, we're probably going to just be very passive in our plays. Because of that, having a card that can slow down the matchup, like Mars, is huge. We're gonna almost, I'm not gonna say always hard mull for the Mars. Like, obviously, searchers come first. Top priority, but a couple searchers plus a Mars is so huge in the Goro matchup. They have their Tashigis that we can remove, and Tashigi is actually an important thing to remove because Tashigi plus a law means that they can recycle the same Tashigi. So putting that into the trash early gets rid of one of those from their cycling. And if you're starving them, then their probability of having that Tashigi when they need it on the next turn is a little bit lower. The other card that we're really we really want to see in that hand, I'm not going to say we're going to hard mull for it or anything, but never existed. Never existed into Zoro is so stupid, right? Because we're probably releasing most of the characters that we play down onto the board just simply out of the perspective that it's probably going to die if it stays on the board. It's probably getting rested. They're going to have to see something. We release it. We get an extra draw to hand at least for that body that's going to die anyway. And if they're not playing bodies down the board, then that means that we're going to be able to just have more cards in hands to be able to stop them. Never Existed says, not only am I going to stop your swing, this is a 1-card out to your 8K swings to life, which are very common. It's very, very strong into the Zoro matchup. This helps us stay at a relatively healthy life. I think if you're just not dead by the time you make it to 10 Dawn, you will probably win into the Zoro matchup every time. The reason for that is because even with a DMG or something, let's say they DMG and then they could swing, that's 4 Dawn to use the DMG to rest 2 blockers, right? Maybe they would rest 1 blocker and 1 of your Dawn. If we're in our 10 Dawn turns, we're probably keeping like 7 Dawn standing, which sounds ridiculous, but like you have no reason not to. So you could play out, you probably have multiple events for counter at that point, okay? So if we're going 2 bodies, they have a DMG to rest our blockers. And let's say they have a restand event. A restand event's another 3 Dons, so they can only swing up to 8. So they could do 2 8s, or they could do 1 11. In either of those situations, are we scared? No, because an 11 is this and a 2 and a 1, or this and a 3, or 2 never existed. Like, there's just so many ways that we get out of it for relatively cheap. And we probably have a really large hand, and then if they do that, they didn't play anything to the board. Our next turn, we just swing out with our whole board again, poke a bunch of times. We then do another set of searches. We find another counter event, and then we just completely outvalue for the rest of the game. Now, let's say that they don't DMG our blockers. If we have 2 blockers, we can just go block late game, get our draw, get another one. If they have a restand event, cool. That's fine. We got another draw, and they have to pay 3 for the restand event, so that's at most 12, which 2 never existed gets us out of that, right? So, in other words, if you make it to late game into the Zoro, going first or second, we're winning. So what we want is cards that slow down the game, and Mars is our best option for slowing down the game. This allows us to remove all but their Law. Most builds of Zoro are playing Law as the highest cost card in their deck. This is what we're looking for. Everything else is just gravy on top. Obviously, a high 2K count is fine, because again, we're wanting to just survive early on, so finding any combinations of these 2Ks, fantastic. But the true key component here is the Mars and the never existed, and then having the searchers to fill our trash and get into our late game to make sure that we're able to do the 10 cost chaining with a full value 10 cost. And that's about it. What about every other matchup? There is way more than just the big 3 matchups that you have to worry about. What about those? Well, I think you can take the principles used in the big 3 matchups to kind of guide how you do other matchups. Stussy is really impactful when it comes to matchups where you're forced to go first. You're going to have a 9-Don turn where they're able to play out a big body before you. This also comes into effect on matchups where they have a big body that is hard to remove. An example would be Roger with the Tenka Shanks, or really any other deck that wants to play the Tenka Shanks. You might want to consider like finding a Stussy. Now you do cycle a lot, and in cases where it's not like a guaranteed thing that they're going to see, I might not mulligan for it as much, but I might be more willing to hold a slightly subpar hand in other aspects if I have the out to like the worst case scenario for the other deck. The thing about playing a deck like Emu, our baseline value is so high that if we just see our normal curve, we're probably going to out value pretty much everyone else. If we're trying to starve the matchup, so like a more aggro matchup, Mars and Venus are the cards that are going to be very valuable. So if it's an aggro deck that turns a lot of cards sideways, playing out the horse and then just swinging into something giving it minus 2K is huge. If we're playing against a deck that doesn't necessarily turn things sideways but has stuff there, playing out Mars to remove it is really good, especially if we're playing like a Bello Betty or something. This gets rid of their Karasu, which is something that you need to kill basically immediately before it turns sideways and gets like crazy value. If we're playing against something that we really need to stall in the early game, consider hard mulling for some of the Warkery or counter events. Something like Bello Betty is something else that, like, if you don't see the Mars right away, you might want to look, if you have a couple of Warkery, that might be worth keeping, especially if you are going second and you have a couple of these as well. That might be a worthwhile thing to do. Let's see, what are some other types of matchups? Removal decks, you just laugh, right? Like, it doesn't matter what you draw, as long as you see the 5 names at some point in the game, you're probably going to win that matchup because your stuff can't be removed from board, right? So, yeah, like into a deck like Purple Luffy is actually legitimately a little bit of a harder deck. We want things that we can stall because they're going to get their Tendon turn faster than us. So we're looking for the War Carees and we're looking for the Never Existed. These are going to be the things that help us make it to late game. Once we get to late game and we're 10-cost gaming, if we're 10-cost gaming with at least 1 life, we're probably winning those matchups. So we just really want to look at what our opponent wants to do, and we want to drag the game out and be in a somewhat even game state by the time we get to our Tendon play. Once we get to the Tendon play, we're going to be 10-cost gaming, and we just need to know how to make sure that we manage our resources and manage the state of the game relatively well. So I hope this helps. I hope I didn't get onto too many tangents and was able to collect my thoughts in a way that is helpful to you. If you have any questions at all, if you want a follow-up video for more specifics on a certain aspect of these mulligans, let me know. But this is, I think, where I'm going to end this video. Thanks for watching, and until next time, see ya.